So, Sony decided to re-release all of the live-action Spider-Man films in theaters for some kind of anniversary, and so that inspired me to do something different that nobody's ever done this on YouTube before. I'm gonna talk about the Spider-Man movies. I'm gonna give them a quick little review. I'm gonna slap them on a tier list. It's super subjective. Opinions change. My opinions change. My opinions are probably different than yours. Don't give it too much thought. It's all subjective. I'm doing this real quick. Anyway, let's start off with
Spider-Man. This is the very first live-action Spider-Man movie. While other Marvel movies had come out in recent times like Blade and X-Men, this one changed the game. We follow the origin story of way too old-looking high school student Peter Parker as he's bitten by a genetically altered spider, develops a really corny relationship with Mary Jane Watson, and balances his friendship with Harry Osborn as his father Norman flies around in what I would consider to be a pretty cool Green Goblin costume. Learning that with great power comes great responsibility after his uncle gets shot by someone who will definitely not be retconned into a supervillain later, Peter takes to the skies with some really good effects for the time as Spider-Man. I won't lie to you, this movie has definitely aged, and like I said, it can be pretty corny, but it's aged and is corny in an endearing way, at least to me. It tells what is probably in my eyes the definitive Spider-Man story as it covers his origin, his main villain the Green Goblin, with an iconic performance from Willem Dafoe, and even has his main love interest Mary Jane Watson, who everyone vehemently hates to a concerning degree. I think the movie does a good job streamlining things for this cohesive 2-hour movie, like removing the idea of web shooters, having Peter and Norman's origins intertwined, and having certain characters appear earlier than their comic counterparts. It also has really good visuals for the time, great cinematography, and really good music as well. As for a rating, I'm going to give it good. I think some of these movies do certain things better, and this one has definitely aged a bit, but it's not bad at all. I'm going to put this one in A tier. Spider-Man 2. After all the shenanigans of the last movie, Peter is down on his luck, trying to hold down a stable job, get through college, and be Spider-Man. If it wasn't bad enough that scientist and mentor Otto Octavius turned himself into a crazy robo-octopus guy, Peter has to deal with his best friend Harry blaming Spider-Man for his father's death, and whether or not being with MJ puts her in danger. Oh, and he's losing his powers too. But don't worry though, after some amazing fight scenes and emotional moments accompanied by some awesome music, Peter gets his powers back and gets back with MJ. Although, Harry hates him now. Well, I think the first movie tells the definitive Spider-Man story. I would say this is the definitive Spider-Man movie. It's an improvement over the original in just about every way. You got better visuals, better effects, better performances, a better villain, and just as great music. It's a very human story combined with the best parts of the superhero genre, and is deservedly considered one of the best superhero movies ever. It's certainly my favorite. For that reason, I'm giving this my rating of great, and putting it all the way up in S tier. Look, I'm not a Raimi shill, I just like the movie. Spider-Man 3. Even though this movie was never meant to be the end of the Raimi franchise, it is packed full of trilogy-ending moments. Peter must confront the Sandman, who is the one who really responsible for his uncle's death and fell into a sand experiment and became sand. He has to go against his best friend who turned into another crazy goblin guy. Oh, and alien goo landed on Earth and is bonded with him symbiotically, feeding on his worst habits. Did I mention he has a rivalry with fellow photographer Eddie Brock, who gets the symbiote in the last 20 minutes of the movie and becomes a really underwhelming take on Venom? It sounds like a lot is happening in this movie, because a lot does happen. I think this movie's biggest issue is that so much happens, and it just doesn't do a good job of juggling it all. Harry has this big climactic battle with Peter super early in the movie, and while it's a cool scene, he gets knocked out and has amnesia, sidelining him for most of the movie. Peter finally gets the black suit, and when he battles Sandman doesn't show up again until the end of the movie, like until it's almost over, getting sidelined again. And since Venom shows up so late into the movie, he doesn't really get enough time to shine either. It retains many of the same positive qualities of the other two. I just think it probably needed one more revision before it could have reached its full potential. Overall, I don't think it's as good as the other two, but I still consider this movie to be good. It feels to me like a rough draft, like it could have been refined. Certain elements could have made it, come together better. But I'll put it in B tier, like a low B tier, maybe almost C. The Amazing Spider-Man. Marketed as the untold story of Spider-Man, audiences would follow Peter Parker as he investigates the mystery of what happened to his parents, till about halfway through the movie before it just does his origin story again. Yeah, this new darker and realistic take on Spider-Man is more or less a repeat of the first one, which only came out like 10 years prior. Sure, there are some differences. Peter investigates his parents' disappearance before that plotline is abandoned. Peter never actually catches his uncle's killer because that plot line is abandoned as well. Oscorp plays a bigger role, serving as setup for a bunch of future movies. Gwen is the main love interest this time, which is actually something I can give this movie like props for. It is much better than the MJ relationship. Although the villain is yet another evil green guy from Oscorp, but instead of having like an iconic look and an awesome performance, he's just a big lizard. Yeah, the main villain for their darker and more realistic Spider-Man movie is a guy who turns into a lizard and wants to turn everybody into lizards. On top of this movie just abandoning storylines left and right as the movie goes on, it feels just like a worse version of a movie I've already seen. It does certain things better in my opinion. I think the movie looks better. The relationship with Gwen is better. I think Andrew Garfield is better casting for Spider-Man. And the music is still pretty good. But when it's all said and done, I feel like I'm watching the first Raimi Spider-Man movie with a worse villain, worse execution of storylines, and a lot of dumb stuff set up for future things that have nothing to do with this individual movie. And also, those movies never happened anyway, so who cares? I'm going to give it my rating of meh. It's not bad, but I feel like it could have been so much more than what we've gotten. If they just skipped the origin story and focused purely on the disappearance of his parents, and maybe used a more like thematically and tonally fitting villain, maybe I would have liked it more. I'm going to put it in C tier. Please don't hate me. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Oh look, it's that one that everybody hates, including me. Honestly, I don't really have the time or the energy to rant about this movie, so I'll try to keep it brief. It's just dumb. It's filled with things I don't really like, things that don't really make sense, and it just feels like an advertisement for a franchise that was never going to go anywhere because they didn't bother focusing on this individual movie. Electro is a terrible villain. He falls into a vat of eels and gets electric powers. That's as dumb as Sandman, but at least Sandman had like a compelling story. Electro just hates Spider-Man because he didn't come to his birthday party or something. Harry Osborn shows up. Apparently he's childhood friends with Peter, even though he was never mentioned once in the first movie and Oscorp is super important. But no, Harry's just here now, and they shoehorn him becoming the Green Goblin and killing off Gwen at the end of this movie because I guess that's a thing that happens in a comic book, so we need to put it in this movie. There's a part at the end of this movie where there's just a room that have all the gear for future Spider-Man villains. It's so blatantly an advertisement for future movies to get fans to point at the screen and be like, hey, isn't that cool? Than to just make a good movie. I mean, they still haven't wrapped up what happened with his parents. They're still dragging this out 2 movies in. Like, it's not all bad. The costume's kind of cool. The action's pretty cool. Peter and Gwen's relationship is still good. The music isn't terrible. But it's a really long movie filled with a lot of stupid stuff, a lot of setup for other movies I don't care about, and what we have here just isn't good. It's bad. I'm putting it in D tier. It's not the worst movie ever made, but I just do not like this one. Spider-Man Homecoming. After Spidey's introduction to the MCU in Captain America Civil War, where he shows up for about 20 minutes after being recruited by Iron Man, we follow young high school student Peter Parker being a friendly neighborhood superhero and trying to live up to his childhood idol, all while managing his high-tech supersuit, managing his high school life, which is portrayed very well in this movie. Some of my favorite stuff is the high school parts, and trying to stop the villainous Vulture, a new take on a classic Spider-Man villain with a pretty good motivation and a cool design. Well, I think the stuff with trying to live up to Iron Man is a little overdone here and is the main criticism people have with this take on the character. The story is ultimately an origin story told in a different way, as it concludes with Peter going against what Iron Man wants, ditching his high-tech suit, and sacrificing any chance he had with his crush to save the day. The movie is definitely refreshing after the Amazing Spider-Man movies. The high school vibe is spot on and explores an area of Spider-Man's life you didn't really get in the other movies. The villain is really good and among the best of these Spider-Man movies in my opinion, and I think certain things were done better in other movies like the visuals and the love interest, but this film is definitely new life injected into the franchise. It's different from the other Spider-Man movies, and I understand why people may not like the MCU trilogy, but I certainly like this one. I think this movie is good. I'm going to put it all the way up in A tier under the first Raimi Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man Far From Home. After the events of Infinity War and Endgame, Spider-Man is back, but Iron Man is gone, and thus our hero must live up to the mantle of... Wait a minute, wasn't the last movie about him not following Iron Man and becoming his own hero? Well, unfortunately, based on how the character was written in different movies, he's now back to being Iron Man's sidekick, living in his shadow and feeling like he's not good enough, which really knocks this movie down a peg. It's by no means bad, and there's a lot to enjoy here though. Peter and his friends are going on a school trip in the summer throughout Europe, Mysterio shows up posing to be a hero even though we know he's a bad guy, and Peter is recruited by Nick Fury to help out while balancing his personal and superhero life in a way that we've never seen before. It's a cool concept for a movie, unfortunately overshadowed by an inconsistent story thread introduced in a different set of movies. Even Mysterio, who traditionally has nothing to do with Iron Man, is made out to be an Iron Man related villain in this, because his origin is that Tony Stark named his technology Barf, and Mysterio gets his hands on an army of killer drones that Tony entrusted to Peter after his death to make himself, look like a hero. And that's just another weird thing, let me say. Why would Iron Man give Spider-Man access to an army of killer drones? Like, that's such a weird thing for Spider-Man to have, and it's rightfully removed after this movie. But besides all the Iron Man stuff, the movie has some unique visuals and action scenes with all of the Mysterio illusion stuff, and some funny scenes with the high school cast. I like it, even though I don't like it as much as Homecoming. I'm going to say it's okay, but like a high okay, almost good. Look, these rankings are subjective, just don't think about it too hard. I'll put it in B tier below Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man No Way Home. With Peter's identity revealed at the end of the last movie, his life has fallen into chaos, which is what you would expect to happen, but in reality it's just harder for him and his friends to get into the college they want to go to. Because you see, they resolve the whole Peter Parker is Spider-Man thing in about 5 minutes, which is really unfortunate because the whole movie had perfect setup for Scorpion to be the main villain after setting him up at the end of Homecoming, and the world knowing who Spidey is. But I guess they wanted to just make way for the multiverse stuff. Anyway, Peter goes to Doctor Strange to get some help, and he begins to cast a spell to make the world forget that Peter is Spider-Man, but it somehow goes wrong and brings in villains from the other Spider-Man movies across the multiverse. Don't ask me, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Peter goes to round them all up and even gets some help from Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, which is a very poorly kept secret as it was practically revealed a year beforehand. Anyway, the day is saved, but not without its consequences, because Aunt May dies, which is a surprisingly dark thing to happen in this movie, and Doctor Strange completes the spell, which for some reason unbeknownst to me, makes everyone forget who Peter Parker is, even though that's not what the spell was meant to do, whatever. Yeah, this movie was fun. It was cool to see the returning characters, it had some great action, and felt like there were some real stakes to what was going on. But with that being said, I just can't help but feel like this movie sacrificed a lot of what made the other movies good in the process. The high school element that was so ingrained in the trilogy's DNA is completely abandoned here, and everything to do with Peter's identity being revealed meant nothing. I felt like there was an entire movie here about Peter trying to graduate high school, clear his name, and battle the Scorpion that will never get to see. I do like the movie, but it definitely felt like they switched gears really fast to capitalize on the whole multiverse concept. But at least the Iron Man stuff is finally done. At the end of the day, though, I think the movie is good. I think it maybe borders on okay, but it's still good. I'm gonna put it above Far From Home on the tier list.
And that's all the live-action Spider-Man movies ranked and reviewed. I'm sure you guys hate me for some of my opinions, love me for some of my others. Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments below, and let's keep things civil, okay? We as Spider-Man fans have to do better, because Spider-Man fans get way too heated about which movies are good, which movies are bad. Let's just talk it out. We can disagree, we can agree. I'm just not even just me, but just like everyone who talks about these movies, okay? So let's just keep things civil. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. You can leave now. Goodbye.